Do you know how many women walk through life never realizing they've become an archetype in the mind of a man, not a person, not a name, but a symbol, a projection, an unsolvable mystery that lingers in his unconscious long after he thinks he's moved on? Carl Jung called these archetypes the primordial images of the collective unconscious. They are not chosen. They are inherited, ancient, and instinctive. And when a man meets a woman who unknowingly touches one of his archetypes, especially the forbidden ones, he feels something he cannot explain. An obsession without logic, a longing without name. Most women never realize this silent power they carry. They think he's pulled away because he's no longer interested, or that he avoids them because he's emotionally unavailable. But in truth, sometimes it's because she has triggered a part of him he isn't ready to meet, a part buried so deeply in his shadow that even he fears it. Some women represent the mother, others the maiden, some become the muse. But there is one that stands apart, the anima. Jung said the anima is the man's inner feminine self, the part of his soul he's been taught to repress. And when he projects this anima onto a woman in real life, she becomes more than herself. She becomes his mirror, his temptation, his gateway to the unconscious. It's not her fault, and it's not his choice. It's a dance older than memory, happening beneath the surface of words and reason. Have you ever wondered why certain men seem drawn to you but can't handle staying close? Why they disappear after intimacy or become strangely defensive when you show emotional depth? It's not because you did something wrong, it's because you stepped into the archetype he secretly fears the most, the woman who calls him to face his own shadow. This is the woman who lives with her own silence, who doesn't perform for male validation, who moves with a rhythm set by her soul, not by social demand. She is not always the loudest in the room, but she is often the most unforgettable. She becomes, to him, an unsolvable puzzle. He might call her difficult. He might say she's too much or too distant. But what he's really saying is, you've awakened something in me that I cannot control. Jung warned of this dynamic. When a man hasn't done his inner work, when he hasn't faced his insecurities or healed his traumas, the feminine energy he craves will terrify him. Not because she's dangerous, but because she shows him parts of himself he's tried to hide. The man thinks he's chasing desire, but he's really chasing transcendence, and the woman becomes the vessel for that longing. Most men project their anima onto women without knowing it. It happens in the glance, in the tone of voice, in the way she holds herself when she's alone. It's not about beauty, it's about presence, mystery, detachment from needing to be understood. The woman who embodies this becomes a symbol in his unconscious. She triggers his shadow self, the parts of him he's buried under years of armor and expectation, his repressed emotions, his secret fears, his silent regrets. They all rise to the surface when he's near her, and that's why he can't explain his reaction. Sometimes he obsesses, sometimes he withdraws, sometimes he oscillates between the two, caught in the push-pull of attraction and terror. You might be tempted to soften yourself to make him more comfortable, to explain your silence, to reassure him that you're safe, but in doing so, you dissolve the very essence that makes you unforgettable. The anima is not meant to be tamed, she is meant to be integrated, and that integration begins not with you lowering your vibration, but with him raising his consciousness. This is why some women become his unsolvable puzzle, because they represent what he has not yet reconciled within himself. The mystery of the feminine is not a role. It's an energy, and it doesn't bow to logic, nor does it fit neatly into the categories a man has been taught to use for control. When a woman embodies this mystery, she doesn't simply attract attention, she awakens discomfort. She activates questions in him that have no simple answers. Questions about who he is when no one is watching. Questions about the wounds he's never healed. Questions about the desires he's tried to bury beneath ambition, distraction, or emotional distance. Carl Jung said, Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Many men call it fate when they meet this kind of woman. They call it chemistry or sometimes chaos, but what they're really encountering is their own unconscious, the forbidden parts, the secret dreams, the unresolved shame. And she is the mirror reflecting it all back. He may desire her body, but it's her soul that haunts him. It's not about the conversations they have or the moments they share. It's about the energetic blueprint she carries, the archetype she embodies without trying. For some men, this feels like falling in love. For others, it feels like falling into a trap. That's because love, for the unevolved man, is often tangled with projection. He doesn't yet see her clearly. He sees himself through her, his needs, his fantasies, his deepest fears. And when she doesn't behave the way his projections expect, when she stays mysterious instead of becoming predictable, when she holds space for her solitude instead of filling every silence with words, he feels the tension rise inside him. He can't categorize her, he can't possess her, and yet he can't let her go. This is when the obsession begins. You might wonder why some men text you at midnight but disappear in the morning, why they get close only to sabotage the connection, why they seem fascinated by your mind but terrified of your depth. It's because you are no longer playing the surface game. You know, you're not offering him a simple distraction. You are offering him a confrontation with his own subconscious. The woman who has embraced her own shadow does not need to explain herself. She does not chase, plead, or perform. She understands that her very existence will stir things in a man that he may not be ready to face. And she allows that discomfort to exist without trying to fix it. This is power, not the loud, aggressive kind, but the quiet, soul-shifting kind, the power of reflection, of truth, of presence. When a woman has done her inner work, she becomes less interested in transactional attention and more attuned to energetic alignment. She can feel the difference between a man who seeks to possess her and a man who is ready to meet her in his own vulnerability. Some men will walk away from this woman, not because she lacks value, but because she holds too much of it. Her energy threatens the structure of his ego. She becomes the unsolvable puzzle because she operates beyond the scripts he's memorized for seduction or control. Jungian psychology teaches that until a man integrates his anima, the feminine part of his own psyche, he will search for it outside of himself, often in destructive or obsessive ways. He will either idolize women or resent them, vacillating between adoration and withdrawal, because he has not yet reconciled the feminine energy within his own soul. And here is the secret most women don't know. When you become this kind of woman, you will no longer fit into the typical narrative of romance. You become less about partnership for comfort and more about partnership for transformation. Some men will rise to meet you, others will fall away. Both are forms of respect. Your role is not to make yourself smaller so he can remain comfortable in his shadows. Your role is to remain whole, an archetype of your own creation, not a projection of his unhealed past. Because the woman who triggers his unconscious is not his enemy. She is his mirror, his challenge, and perhaps, if he chooses growth, his liberation. Some women unknowingly step into this role, the mirror, the mystery, the catalyst, and wonder why men pull away or fall apart. They question themselves. They assume they are too much, too complicated, too intense. But the truth is, they have simply touched something ancient in the male psyche, a wound that modern culture refuses to name. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the suppressed, rejected parts of the self. For men, this often includes vulnerability, fear of emotional dependency, and the terror of insignificance. When a woman stands fully in her feminine power, not performative femininity, but authentic archetypal energy, she holds up a mirror to his shadow. And that reflection is not always pretty. He may feel desire, yes, but it's a desire laced with confusion. He wants her, but resents needing her. He feels drawn to her depth, but fears drowning in it. He projects both goddess and destroyer onto her image because she has become both in his mind. She is Eve and Lilith, Madonna and Magdalene, comfort and chaos, all at once. This is not because she is manipulative or withholding. It is because she is whole, and wholeness activates the unfinished work in anyone who encounters it. You, the woman watching this, may have already experienced this pattern. You may have felt the magnetic pull of a man's fascination only to witness his sudden withdrawal. You may have tasted the intimacy of emotional connection only to feel the sting of distance when he panics. It's not always because you did something wrong, it's because you did something right. You stood in your truth, and truth is a dangerous thing for an unintegrated ego. Some men are not ready for this. Their identity is built on control, performance, and denial. They are conditioned to chase surface-level validation but fear real connection. They seek conquest, not communion. But when they meet a woman who embodies the archetype, who refuses to shrink into a digestible version of herself, they feel the tension between their persona and their shadow. This tension can create obsession. Not love, not healthy desire, obsession. Why? Because the psyche craves wholeness, even when it fears it. A man who has not integrated his feminine side will project it onto a woman and become psychologically dependent on her presence to feel alive. But because this dependency scares him, he will also resent her for the hold she has on his mind. It's a paradox that fuels countless relationship dynamics, often silently and invisibly. She becomes, in his unconscious, the key to his wholeness. But he has not yet realized that the real work is his own. So he oscillates, he ghosts, he returns, he sabotages, he stays in the loop because the loop is safer than the leap into his shadow. Meanwhile, the woman wonders, should I make myself easier? Should I soften my edges? Should I hide my mystery to keep him close? The answer is no. The woman who lives as an archetype must not betray her nature for the comfort of those unwilling to evolve. Her role is not to chase love, but to embody it. Not to seek approval, but to radiate self-trust. Not to explain her depth, but to remain rooted in it. Seneca once wrote, "If you wish to be loved, love yourself first. But deeper than that, if you wish to attract someone who can meet you, meet yourself first. Integrate your own shadow. Accept your loneliness when it comes. Understand that solitude is not punishment, it is preparation. Because when you become whole, you will no longer beg for half-formed love. And this is where the real power lies. A woman who becomes his unconscious obsession is not a seductress by tactic, she is a seductress by truth. She has made peace with her own darkness. She has met her reflection in the mirror and stayed. She has felt her grief, her longing, her rage, and integrated them into wisdom. This is what makes her rare, not her appearance, not her charm, but her capacity to hold both light and shadow without collapsing into either. Some men will run from this kind of woman, others will return over and over, unable to let go, but unable to surrender fully. A rare few will step into the fire of their own shadow, face their projections, and meet her inequality. These are the men she allows into her world, not because she needs them, but because she chooses them. Remember this, the woman who becomes his unsolvable puzzle is not confusing, she is complete. Most women are taught to avoid this kind of power. Society warns them, don't be too much, don't be too mysterious, don't be too independent, smile more, be softer, make him feel needed, stay small enough to fit into his comfort zone. But archetypal femininity has no interest in comfort zones. The true feminine, what Jung called the anima in a man's unconscious, is not a damsel in distress. She is not a fantasy conjured for his convenience. She is a living symbol of his own emotional depths, and that makes her dangerous to his ego. When a woman stops performing for male validation, she becomes the mirror of his inner world. She is not just a woman. She is his shadow's reflection. She activates the parts of him he refuses to face, his vulnerability, his dependency, his fear of rejection, his hunger for connection beyond superficial conquest. This is why he may describe her as confusing. She is not confusing. She is merely beyond the level of his current emotional literacy. He cannot solve her because she is not a problem to be solved. She is a mystery to be respected. Carl Jung wrote that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. The woman who lives in her archetypal energy transforms everyone she encounters, whether they realize it or not. Some men will mistake this transformation for danger. Others will recognize it as destiny. But the difference is not her responsibility. You may have noticed this pattern before. A man becomes intrigued by your silence. He is drawn to your detachment, fascinated by your refusal to chase. You don't explain yourself. You don't overshare. You are present, yet sovereign, available, yet not grasping. This unsettles him because in that silence his mind fills the gaps with projection. He imagines who you are. He creates stories about you. He oscillates between wanting to possess you and fearing you will reveal the parts of him he has spent his life avoiding. This is not about games or manipulation. This is about psychological polarity. Men are conditioned to believe they must lead, but when they meet a woman who leads herself, who answers only to her own inner compass, they often experience a subtle ego death. It's not conscious, but it's real. His masculine shell fractures just enough to expose the tender parts beneath. And yet those fractures are the gateway to growth. For a man to truly evolve, he must integrate his anima, the feminine aspect of his soul. He must stop projecting it onto women and instead cultivate it within himself. Only then can he stop seeking completion through someone else. Only then can he meet a woman as an equal, not as an idol or an enemy. Until that happens, he will continue to circle the mystery. He will desire her, fear her, resent her, crave her. He will watch her walk away and obsess over why he let her go. He will return only to repeat the same dance. And the woman, she must understand this. His struggle is not her responsibility to fix. Her role is not to soften her truth to accommodate his comfort. Her role is to remain centered in herself, to become the puzzle, not because she wants to confuse, but because she refuses to simplify her wholeness into something he can easily digest. The woman who becomes his unconscious obsession knows how to sit with her solitude. She knows how to hold space for her own emotional complexity. She does not chase affection because she understands that chasing is the symptom of someone who has forgotten their worth. Instead, she lets him come and go and come back again without betraying her core. This is not coldness, it's clarity. It is the discipline of a woman who has faced her own shadow and no longer fears the loneliness that sometimes follows. She understands that being misunderstood is the price of living authentically. She has accepted that not everyone can meet her at the level of her depth, and that is okay, because she knows the man who is ready will not be terrified of her mystery. He will not run from his shadow. He will sit in his discomfort, face his projections, and grow into the kind of man who can love without control. And when that man arrives, she will not need to explain herself. She will simply choose. Some women become his unconscious obsession not because they fit his fantasies, but because they shatter them. When a woman embodies the depth of her archetypal energy, she doesn't conform to what he expects. She radiates something else, something he can't quite name. She evokes not just desire, but reflection. She pulls him into a realm where linear logic fails, where emotions swirl like smoke, where his usual strategies of control collapse. This is the sacred tension Carl Jung wrote about, the confrontation between the ego and the unconscious. And in this tension, she becomes the mirror of his unresolved longing. At first, he may label her as too much, too deep, too detached, too enigmatic. But these labels are defense mechanisms, masks to cover the truth. She is not too much. She is simply a mirror to the void he has not yet filled within himself. Her mystery triggers his shadow because she operates outside the roles he knows how to control. She doesn't over-explain her past. She doesn't justify her silence. She doesn't rush to correct his assumptions. And so he is left with his own mind. What happens when a man cannot decode a woman? He projects. He fills the unknown with fantasies, fears, and desires. He oscillates between idolizing her and resenting her for the power she holds, not because she forces it, but because he senses she answers to something deeper than his approval. The man who hasn't faced his shadow will react to this with obsession. He may try to chase her, conquer her, or dismiss her to soothe his pride, but secretly he returns to thoughts of her when he is alone, when the distractions fade, when the world grows quiet. Why? Because she represents what he has suppressed: vulnerability, longing, emotional rawness, the parts of himself he was told to bury as a boy. Jung called these archetypal patterns psychic templates. They live in the collective unconscious. They shape attraction, relationships, even love, whether or not we're aware of them. And the woman who becomes the unsolvable puzzle in his life, she is the doorway to those templates. But here's the paradox: her power doesn't come from trying to become mysterious. It comes from being real. Real, in this case, means unapologetically complex, unapologetically whole, refusing to amputate parts of herself to fit into someone else's expectations. She lets her contradictions live side by side, the soft and the sharp, the nurturing and the distant, the tender and the fierce. This is what makes her unforgettable. She is not acting a role. She is not following a script. She is embodying her full self, shadow and light intertwined. And for the man who meets her, this is both magnetic and terrifying because it forces him to confront the parts of himself that have stayed asleep. And the immature ego wants simplicity, predictability, and submission. But the soul craves expansion. And nothing expands a man's soul like a woman who will not reduce herself to a role in his story. She becomes an invitation to grow or a trigger for collapse. But remember, it's not her job to decide which. Her responsibility is not to rescue him from his projections. It's to live fully in her own archetypal truth, knowing that this very act will either repel or inspire, awaken or offend, but never leave him unchanged. There is something almost alchemical about this process. When a woman stands in her feminine mystery without apology, she turns ordinary attraction into transformation. She turns shallow romance into a mirror of the unconscious. She shifts the conversation from "how do I make him like me" to "how do I stay true to myself no matter who comes or goes?" And the truth is, not every man will be ready for this level of connection. Some will call her cold, some will call her impossible, some will circle back years later, still wondering why she haunts them. But the woman who knows her worth does not explain her magic. She does not shrink to soothe discomfort. She lets the world think what it will because she knows her power is not in being understood. It's in being authentic. And that authenticity, that raw refusal to play small, is exactly what makes her unforgettable. She becomes the unsolvable puzzle, not because she is trying to be, but because she refuses to abandon herself for anyone's comfort. The result? She lives in his mind long after she leaves the room. She becomes the one who got away, the lesson he can't unlearn, the reflection of his own shadow whispering, "There's more work to do." And she knows some men will never face that work, but the one who does, he will no longer seek to solve her. He will seek to meet her fully, equally, soul to soul. And when that moment comes, she will not need to chase. She will choose